Hello, welcome to the Royal Road School of Carmelite Prayer. We are studying the book of her Foundations by Teresa of Avila, and today we are taking a look at chapter 7, where Teresa gives us counsels on melancholy or depression. And she tells us how one must deal with nuns who have melancholy or depression. This chapter is very necessary for the prioress or the superior of the convent. My sisters have repeatedly asked me to say something of how to deal with melancholy, depression. We strive not to accept these nuns, but sometimes it's really hard to recognize it until it's too late. The problem is that those with it can seek to do their own will. So it is very important to identify these nuns, to govern them, to avoid harm to other nuns. Not all those who have this issue are problematic, though, and there are greater and lesser degrees of the illness, but it can interfere with one's reason. What won't our passions do once our reason is darkened? It seems that if reason is lacking, madness results. But in those of whom we are speaking, melancholy hasn't reached madness, which would be less harmful. To have to consider someone rational when she isn't is an unbearable burden. Those afflicted with this illness are to be pitied, but they do no harm. To bring them under control, the solution is to put fear into them. The prioress needs to make use of penance to attempt to bring these persons into submission. They have to understand that they will not get their way. If they believe that their rants will get them what they want, they will be lost. One such person is enough to disrupt an entire monastery. As the person cannot defend herself against the devil, the prioress must proceed with great care, governing her exteriorly and in interior matters. As the reason is obscured in the sick person, the prioress must understand the situation to avoid the devil taking control of the person. The illness not only afflicts the reason at times, and the person is then not at fault. However, in those in whom the reason is weak, has fault. It is dangerous if, when ill, they begin to take liberties. They are not to do so, or they won't be masters of themselves when well. The most important thing to a melancholic or depressive person is getting their own way, saying whatever they want, criticizing others, and finding rest in what pleases them. In sum, they are like a person who cannot bear anyone who resists him. If each passion goes unmortified, each seeking to get what it wants, what would happen if no one resisted them? The only remedy is to make these persons submit in every way. If words do not suffice, use punishment. If light punishment is not enough, try heavy punishment. If a month in a prison cell is not enough, try 4 months. No greater good can come for these souls. Even if at times they may be unable to help themselves, it is important that they understand this, as the soul remains in much danger as the affliction is not complete. Madness, which excuses one from any fault. At times, though, the reaction is so overpowered, the reason, is so overpowered that the person is no longer in control of his actions. It is a mercy from God that they submit to someone to get through the crisis. It is here that lies all their good, and perhaps even their own salvation. I so know people who are on the border of losing their minds completely, but they are humble and fearful of offending God. So they do what they're told. They follow orders. They suffer their illness, as do others, although this is a greater martyrdom. Thus they suffer purgatory here on earth and will have greater glory in heaven. Let me repeat that those who don't submit be urged to do so by the prioress, and not be deceived with indiscreet pieties, lest they disturb all those around them with their confusion. There is another very great harm. Since the afflicted nun may appear good, others may think they too have melancholy or depression, and so need to tolerate her. This leads to difficulty providing a remedy. This matter is so important, though, that no negligence should be allowed. If the afflicted nun resists the superior, she needs to pay for it as a healthy nun would, with no exceptions. It may seem unjust to punish a sick person who can't help it. Therefore, it would be also unjust to bind and whip the insane, and the just thing would be to allow them to kill everyone. I have attempted many remedies, and I find no other. It is absolutely not allowed for these nuns to take liberty, because one has pity on them, as it will end up harming the other nuns. If the insane are bound and chastised so as not to kill others, this is right and the compassionate thing, since they cannot control themselves. So how much more must one be careful not to allow these melancholic persons liberties by which they could harm souls? I believe this affliction is often found in unrestrained souls that lack humility and discipline. Melancholy doesn't have the same strength as in the insane, because when there is someone to fear, they do control themselves, and they can. Why then can't they do so for God? I think the devil, through melancholy, wants to gain many souls. Today, all self-will and freedom go by the name melancholy. It is my feeling, then, that this term should not be uttered in monasteries, as it brings with it freedom from control. It is preferable to call it a serious illness and care for one and cared for as a serious illness. Sometimes medicine is definitely necessary, and the nun needs to be cared for in an infirmary. But when she comes out, she must understand that she is to be humble and obedient, as are the other nuns. When she is not, her illness cannot be used as an excuse. The procedure is fitting. The prioress must lead the nuns with much compassion, as would a mother seeking whatever remedy possible. Perhaps it seems I am contradicting myself, as I said that these nuns must be dealt with strictly. I repeat, they cannot think that they can come out of the infirmary and do as they wish, nor can they disobey. The harm comes from them thinking that they can do as they please. But the prioress can refrain from ordering impossible tasks that would set the nun up to fail. She should lead with skill and love, so that the afflicted submit out of love, which does usually happen. She should show her love for these afflicted nuns in word and deed. The greatest remedy is to occupy them with duties to prevent their imagination from wandering. This is the root of the trouble. And though they don't necessarily perform the duties very well, the prioress should suffer some defects from these nuns in order to avoid suffering greater ones if melancholy overpowers the nun. This is the most suitable remedy one can provide. Strive to avoid long periods of prayer, which, because of their weak imaginations, will do them much harm. Let care be taken that they rarely eat fish and fast less than the others. It may seem excessive to give so much advice for this affliction and not for any other, there being so many serious ones in our miserable life. I do so, though, first of all, because it seems these nuns are well. That's the impression they give, because they hide their affliction. They don't need to be in bed. They don't have a fever. We don't need to call a doctor. The prioress needs to be the doctor. For it's a sickness that impedes perfection more than that of those who are in bed and danger of dying. Secondly, with other illnesses, either one is cured or one dies. With this illness, however, the victims are rarely cured, nor do they die, but they eventually lose their minds completely, a death capable of killing all the other nuns. They suffer more than death in themselves through afflictions and fantasies, all of which they call temptations, and so they will have much merit. If only they could understand that the illness is the cause of these afflictions and fantasies, they would find much relief provided they paid no attention to them. Please understand, I do have great compassion for them, as should the other nuns living with them. The Lord can give this compassion, and the other nuns should strive to accept these afflicted nuns. Please, the Lord, that I may have succeeded in pointing out the proper thing to do in regard to so serious an illness. Amen. So we have reached the end of chapter 7, where Teresa talks about depression and its remedy. And the next counsel she will give is on revelations and visions before we get back to the next foundation that we are going to look at. So thank you so much for following along with me, and God bless you. So the next foundation we'll look at is Malagon, followed by Valladolid. God bless you. Amen.